don't adjust your audio. I'm just sick as hell to kick off this new episode of the Screen Love Affair podcast with my boy Brandon. We're here to talk about Rental Family and Hamnet. Two similar in spirit, I guess, movies in the feelings department, but one that I think will have significant awards hopes and one that will not have significant awards hopes.
I
But
was really worried when you started this podcast off saying sick as hell because I was like, I don't know if I would use that to describe either or, but yeah, you are definitely sick as hell.
yeah, you can't hold me back. The weird thing, like I got real bad Thursday, was better a little on, well, got worse Friday. Saturday I felt good, so that's when I had to go see all the movies we're talking about. And then by going to see 3 movies on Saturday, I think I put myself back down into a bit of a hole here. So
And credit where it's
I'm
due, you really held back. You were supposed to see a fourth movie, but you, a polite
I
theater
did.
goer, were like, you know what? I don't need to go see Sisu 2. I can take a minute, recover, and also not be a total burden to the theater going community with my illness. So,
Yeah. The
respectfully,
the worst part for me was definitely when I walked home, like coming back, I was just like, I could have done the fourth one. And then I was like trying to go to sleep last night and was like coughing way more. So I was pretty good at the theater itself. I had like a system and we were all set up. I was drinking lots of fluids. But yeah, I was doing my best. Well, let's kick off with talking about Rental Family. I don't think either of us will have a ton to say about this because I anticipate we're fairly similar here, but by and large for me, I just thought this was a really sweet little movie. A good use of, I think it was 100+ minutes or so. I love Brendan Fraser. This is more in the, like, it really traffics on his like sweetness, I would say, and just like endearing character
I
that it
can't
really
help but laugh
works.
as you're saying all this because your voice is so bad and you're so like frail right now. That is the movie review I would expect from like a 60-year-old person being like, I just love Brendan Fraser and it's a cute movie with sweet things and God sure is nice to be nice to old people and so sorry for
To be
laughing,
fair,
but
that
yeah, that's
was the
exactly how I felt too.
average age of the film goer in Rental Family
Yes,
when we went to go
yes.
see it, was probably in their 60s. A lot of gray hairs.
A lot of gray hairs.
Um,
I would say similarly, like this pairing was really funny because yeah, Rental Family and Hamnet, exact same demographic. Like both theaters pretty full on opening weekend. Less so for Rental Family because it was like a much bigger theater. But
yeah.
as I looked around, it was all kind of like retirees or lonely 30-year-old men like myself seeing the movie. And I thought, oh, maybe they're not lonely. Maybe they also have a podcast with their best friend. And that's why they're here on a Friday night instead of at the bar. But yeah, very polarizing age gap in the crowd. It was 30-year-olds who are like, I love Brendan Fraser because I grew up in the 90s. And 60-year-olds that are like, I love a feel good, classical story told. So very interesting that you made that observation.
Yeah, no, it was, and honestly, the thing was, because of the age of the people, I wasn't even the loudest. Like, there were people regularly like clearing their throats and coughing the whole time. Apparently, the olds were out in full force for the
The
sickness too.
olds.
Yeah, the olds, man, I'm telling you. But yeah, no, I think by and large, like, this really, um it's an inoffensive movie in a lot of ways. Like, it plays it safe, but again, that doesn't mean it was really any less touching. I did get emotional at one point, which we'll cover a little bit in the spoilery side. But um, yeah, like, this was just really kind of a heartwarming kind of feel good thing, and led by Brendan Fraser, who just is like infinitely sweet, and like that lends that character so much, I think. And like, it was really, again, like, super, like, I say inoffensive, like, to the point that, like, there's no edges to this at all. It's really
Zero
brushed and
edges.
clean. Like,
Yeah.
even the very end, like how the business of Rental Family kind of like looks like it's really kind of stereotypical, and like made me chuckle, frankly. But like, again, it wasn't trying to be anything really. It was definitely unashamedly what it was. And like I said, to me, it was just like a fun, sweet little movie. Um yeah, And if you wanna feel good at a movie, which is like, I know we talk about escapism and all this other stuff and all the reasons you can go to the theater. I think this is definitely worth the trip just to come away feeling a little good about life.
I would definitely agree. I think the cynic in me who enjoys those emotional gut punch movies found this, very edgeless, not in a bad way, but just a way where by the time things conclude and your journey throughout the film, you're not going to be feeling super tense or on edge. There's definitely some great tension building in some scenes, and there's some good like inter turmoil and drama there. But yeah, very, I would say toothless or edgeless for sure. The only bit of marketing I saw for this movie was probably an Instagram podcast similar to this one, where somebody said this is just a postcard love letter to Japan. And I was like, oh, interesting. And it definitely is like the scenery and just kind of the atmosphere. It's very good, like Japanese movie. Weirdly enough, and we'll get into this when we discuss the movie at nauseum, but the feeling of this movie is like a very Japanese film, like between, like you said, the way kind of it ends and between some like the, just dynamics and like the honesties and it's something that actually I feel like comes across in a lot of Japanese movies. And when we saw some like Toho movies and Godzilla's and stuff like that, like this feels like a very Japanese made film. And it's almost like Brendan Fraser is just kind of like the fish out of water in Japan doing like, it's almost an archetype really of like the Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson becomes like a mascot for being the schleppy every guy American man in Japan. That's something I think like if you've been around for 20 years, you've seen done in multiple TV shows or movies or whatever. And, this just fills that framework out with a lovable actor and a decent cast, a decent story. There was times when I was trying to guess where the story would go, and it definitely kind of would pull up from the nosedive I thought it would be in. So I'd say it's worth checking out. It's definitely enjoyable, very unoffensive. I talked about being at a wedding where I just saw If I Had Legs, I Would Kick You. And I was saying how good it was because it was such like a anxious gut punch. And this lady was like, I go to the movie for escapism. I don't go to feel terrible. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. And this is definitely a movie I could recommend to the lady at that wedding. Just a good
Yeah.
time. But again, like Shea was saying, not a ton to say. It's not like I can criticize choices that upset me. It's not like I can really riff on like things I liked other than just be like, that was nice. So I think general thoughts on the Heartometer, I would definitely say I liked it.
Yeah.
Don't think I could love it because it didn't, go the extra mile. Didn't really hit me in ways I wasn't expecting. And I too, I think got emotional at least at one scene or two. Um, not spoilery, but I definitely feel like this reminds me of a friend of mine who is like a guy who is very average, and he went to like Korea and China, just kind of traveled to Asia, just to kind of like, I don't know, if you're a very boring, normal Caucasian guy and you got nothing going on, and you go to a foreign land, now all of a sudden you're the guy, the token, Canadian American guy. So I kind of had like this internal bit every time I was watching this, where when Brendan Fraser is just kind of like, well, that sure was crazy. Very Japanese. I was like, this definitely reminds me of a specific friend in my friend group. So, yeah. But anyways, not here to talk about that. I want to talk about Rental Family. So, go see
Well,
it.
yeah,
Oh,
we
and
can
we'll
dig
probably
into
spoil
the
it.
spoiler part now a little bit. Again, I won't have a ton to say. I do want to say, yeah, the establishing shots. Like I thought all of this looked really beautiful.
Hmm.
Not like, they weren't doing anything like overwhelmingly particular with it, but it was just the scenery, the locations they were on, even the skyscapes, like when they were doing that, even shots from like his apartment looking at the apartment across the way, like everything just looked really nice, which
On
stood
that
out to
note,
me fairly early.
on that specific note, I just moved to a condo, so I'm living in a condo for the first time, like amongst a bunch of high rises, and the shots where they showed kind of like the compactness of Japan and the skyline and stuff like that. I was
Yeah,
like, wow. Like for me in my time of life, I was like, oh, it's really beautiful and really interesting. Like the whole movie is basically, wow, it's really beautiful and interesting. But yeah, I
pretty
totally
much.
agree. I again like the postcard of Japan love letter comment is like so true. You definitely see this and be like, oh, I want to go to Nagasaki. Like
Yeah.
uh,
Well, and especially as we get towards the end there, when they like travel more outside of the city and everything, and you see the kind of different parts of it. Um, like, yeah, just overwhelmingly beautiful, way more interesting looking than that hiking movie we saw earlier this year, which
That
looked
was
terrible.
Taiwanese, and it
Yeah,
was the yellow ghost of a. I can't even quote it. It was such a long
yeah.
title, but
It was the scenery was not as good. Similar vibes in terms of like the location once they got out to the mountains in this movie, but yeah, it was just again just a lot more light and vibrant, which like it's funny because of how much that stands out now. And
mm.
you know, we're not talking about Wicked for good on these podcasts, but you know, like notoriously muted color palette on those movies. And especially like there's been pictures of the set designs have come out, and they're vibrant and full of color, and that the footage from the movie looks washed out and gray like everything else does.
I've seen
And so
so
for
many
a
memes
movie,
about color graders
oh,
seeing that
yeah.
and just being like, well, yeah, dude, like you just film it and add it back in, and then they're like they forgot to add it back. Like just all the amount of like movie making cinema memes of the color grade alone has made me want to go see it. That and all like the cast giving their terrible press interviews where they look like
Oh
anemic
yeah.
and very like mentally unwell.
You couldn't
Uh,
pay me to see that movie, honestly. I didn't care to see the first one, especially when the theater like the videos coming out of like people at their
yeah, the sing
screenings
along
like
crowd. It was like the
I
Minecraft
like I
movie
said,
before
I'm
Minecraft.
okay if you have a dedicated sing-along screening. I do not accept that in any context outside of that, and so it would
To
just be miserable.
to hit that Wicked tangent, my girlfriend really wants to see the new one, so I probably will. I've never seen the first one, so we put it on this week. Stacked week for movies and TV shows on streaming and in theaters, by the way. But we put on Wicked 1. And long story long, I was watching it and I had a hard time really enjoying it. Not because I'm like a bro and this is obviously meant for music theater people and all that jazz. But I didn't love it. But I was like, well, I usually do like a good musical, and I was trying to think like of an example. So we watched the entire Wicked movie, 2 hours and 50 minutes, like a 3 hour movie. And then right after, I was like, babe, can we please watch the opening 5 minute number from La La Land? I just need a palate cleanser. So I put it on. They're doing like the Another Day of Sun, like highway dance. And I was like, that's music. That's cinema, baby. Like, let's watch La La Land now. My girlfriend's like, I don't want to watch that movie because you kept saying it's the perfect movie to show somebody before you break up with them. And yeah, I mean, it is, but I mean, it's just a phenomenal movie, which also ranks as one of the highest movies on Letterboxd for men and women audiences
Yeah,
because
I saw
everybody
that.
unanimously is like, what a great love story that is tragic and dynamic. But again, I'm not here to talk about that movie, but yeah, wow, that was such a
Watch
tangent.
La
But
La Land instead of Wicked for good or
yeah,
whatever.
watch
Not
La La
worth
Land a
your
second
time.
time instead of Wicked 2 for good. So,
Yeah, exactly. The
uh,
one thing I wanted to talk about with Rental Family, other than Brendan Fraser's performance, was the like there was obviously the father-daughter um component, which was really sweet, but I think the one that really got me was the old man.
yeah,
So for anyone that's like listening that hasn't seen it, but he basically is an actor for hire that fills roles in people's lives. And this old man's daughter hires him to pretend to be a writer that's writing about
a
this old man
journalist
who's
who's
an
really interested in
actor.
his career
Yeah,
as he's kind of like in the twilight years, his career's fading, he's fading,
yeah,
and she wants to make him feel special again. So
yeah,
Brendan Fraser gets to interview him and grow an unexpected friendship. And yeah, it develops. At first, I thought it was going nowhere. And then when you realize that's more the meat and potatoes of
yeah,
like the overarching theme, you think the daughter thing is going to be kind of the climactic thing of the movie, but it's
yeah.
definitely the heart and I think the through line with the movie and the themes that I took from it come from the old man sequence as well.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there was just again, it was one of those things that was really sweet and sad, and just like it was that was the moment that kind of made me tear up towards the end there. It was that sequence when they go on that trip. He kidnaps him and they, what did they call, the great escape or something, whatever he
Yeah.
said, jailbreak or whatever it was.
Yeah, he wakes him
Um
up at like, an ungodly hour, and he's just like, we got to go. And this almost borderline dementia riddled old man's like, what? And he's afraid. He's like, jailbreak. And immediately the old man locks in. He's like, oh, okay.
yeah,
And he knows they're going on the road trip to his hometown to revisit the past. And yeah, it was, again,
He tries to
charming
give him that
movie.
outfit, and he's like,
Yeah,
"I'm gonna put my own outfit on," and then he
yeah,
has
yeah,
the
yeah.
cool swag shot of him in his kit. But
That was
yeah,
a
no,
good theater laugh chuckle moment. Like there's only a
yeah,
handful sprinkled in where everyone really like got on board and was like, oh my God, but that was a moment where I was like, crazy old man and Brendan Fraser at it again, and it's like, oh yeah, heartwarming.
yeah. No, that was really it for me. Like that was the only kind of part that I thought like stood out particularly. And again, the situation with the little girl where he had to pretend to be her father and stuff. Again, sweet. It kind of bookends the whole thing really. Um, and like, he gives up that job from that acting, audition that he went to start the movie, basically for this girl and for this guy. And I thought, like again, it was just like one of those things like, oh, that was sweet and it worked. And like in lesser hands with a lesser actor, it just would have been more forgettable and less interesting. But again, like I think it was just full of life, full of color, and full of that kind of tenderness that just permeated through the whole thing. So it's hard to like come away. Like I understand if you're like, it didn't really do a ton for me, fair, but I feel like it's tough to come away from this movie feeling anything but positive.
On a less positive note, I would say I'm in the same boat, and I don't think it's worth retreading or overly summarizing it. I think most people know what they're getting into, but to discuss endings and kind of where my head was at in the movie was I was almost wondering when it would get some edge because it was a very unoffensively enjoyable time. I would say in a Western kind of atmosphere, the story of a guy pretending to be a little girl's dad and getting very emotionally attached and then finding her at a playground at the end of the movie to have their own one-on-one. I was a little bit like groomer coded, I guess you could say. And I was like, I'm glad they didn't go that route where the mom was like, he's way too invested in my daughter. Cause the mom's kind of like an overbearing parent and Brendan Fraser's like a real nice guy to this young woman who's struggling. And yeah, it's beautiful in the right ways. It never went down that dark road. When we talk about the old man, it hints at like his health complications and how like there's a reason why his daughter is against him going on this trip or doing anything outside of like being interviewed in the house because he's very frail and mentally not there. Like he might as well walk off into traffic. And there is a scene where Brendan Fraser wakes up after a great night where they're visiting the family home and the man's gone, and I immediately was like, I bet he's wandered off the cliff. This was actually a suicide ritual, and now Brendan Fraser's in a crime thriller Tokyo courtroom drama for the last 20 minutes. It doesn't do that either. In fact, it actually goes the mile to avoid all that. Like, and then in a very, I say Japanese way, but I'm thinking like Toho movies where, you know, a group of kind of plucky characters that have been there the whole time. This is like the supporting cast, the coworkers at this business that Brendan Fraser works for, the human family, rental family actors. They, they all pretend to be police officers or investigators or lawyers, and they go to like essentially calm down the person who's pressing the kidnapping charges, which is the daughter that hired them, because they also don't want to be like brought into the spotlight as this really weird business. Um, Even though like the business of like rental people is real, like I've seen that online and stuff. Like in Japan, you can hire essentially like a friend because there's like a loneliness thing, and it's seen as like a cathartic therapeutic thing. And it's weird for us here, but I've heard that's like somewhat commonplace there. So I could buy into the premise. It didn't seem that alien. But long story long, yeah, it basically sets up this little drama with what happens with the old man, where he basically just kind of gets, he's old, he has the, he falls down, and Brendan Fraser's arrested for kidnapping and all this, and then it just kind of glosses over it to the end, where everybody involved has kind of like, realized the value of friendship and real coworkers and friends as opposed to being a fake one. And the head of the company who rents his own family, which you see a few times, and at the end it's revealed like that's a rental family service that he probably created the business for himself.
Yeah.
It ties a bow on everything almost a little too beautifully because I'm maybe too cynical. I was hoping there would be a little bit more of a gut punch, but in reality, it was just like a very
Brandon
sweet
needed
bow.
more divorced dad energy in the film
Yeah,
to feel
yeah,
real.
definitely. It has an opportunity for that, but it doesn't focus on it, so I didn't engage on that level. But yeah, anyways, long story long, yeah, I thought it was sweet, but in a very like again Japanese or like the Toho movies we saw, like the Sham movie we saw at Fantasia, where by the end of it, it's explained and wrapped up in such a black and white way. There's no ambiguity to it. And
Yeah.
again, that's fine. You don't need everything to be this like morally gray, complex thing. And the movie never promises that. But as like an avid theater goer, I was really expecting there to be some hiccup, because like the premise of the movie is kind of weighing the value of being a temporary person in someone's life, be it a father to a girl or a friend to an old man. The consequences are kind of dramatic, where you become attached both for them and for you. And I thought it was a good little dance, but they didn't ever have like a big crazy dance move in this analogy. It was very just kind
Mhm.
of through and through good. And yeah, it ends very holistically. Whatever they were set up before was paid off in a small way. Everyone learned a lesson. Like it felt like an after school special in a way, which isn't always a bad thing. But for me, I always kind of hope there's a little bit more of impact. And the impact was just like, well, that's sweet. And so here we are.
Brandon needs a
um,
dark side for it. No, I hear what you're saying, and like I agree. I think that's what separates like a movie like we said that we both like from one that we love, is that there's just a bit more to kind of sink your teeth into. And I think like to me it was the innocence and purity of the movie that I just kind of appreciated that innocence a little bit. Like you said, that when Brendan Fraser shows up at the end and we're like, oh man, like it's hard not to have that exact thought. Like I had the same thought, but
like
the
he's
fact
crossing
that
a
like,
line a few different times, but that scene outside the schoolyard, you're like, ooh,
well, right, and but then like the movie clarifies, like, oh, I've already asked your mom if it was okay or whatever, but it doesn't do it in a way that it felt like we know what you're thinking and like try to address it. Like again, it just felt like innocent and pure, and I kind of liked that because again, we are in like a dour time when everyone's all down and there's a lot of Debbie Downer things happening in entertainment. It's like it's okay to have just like again, you don't see like again, you see like cleanly wrapped up and stuff, but again, that innocence and that purity that just kind of bled right through it. I was like, oh, I kind of like that. And that felt refreshing in a climate where we get so much without that, right? It's like morally complex characters and people that like you like, but they do things that you don't. And
yeah,
it's
dude,
like all
I
kinds
wish
of,
Brendan Fraser was a real anti-hero who was
yeah,
doing this because his daughter died and he needed to fill the void. I mean, they kind
yeah,
of do
yeah,
that with
yeah,
the old man, where he says him and his dad had a strained relationship and he didn't make it to the funeral. He flew to the airport and sat in the terminal and didn't go to the
yeah.
funeral. So again, very Bo ending. He goes to the old man's funeral, somebody who he respected and grew to love and understood about himself. Like it's a what's the word? Like not symbiotic, but those parasites or those fish that swim on sharks. Like,
Yeah,
anyways, yeah, it's one of those relationships where he starts thinking he's scamming them by pretending to be their friend, but throughout the time they become real friends. And
yeah,
I think that's like a theme in the movie, is kind of like a memory is the most valuable thing. And be it real
yeah,
or not, be it with rose colored glasses, it's the time you spend and the people you have there. Again, very corny lesson to learn. But yeah, very beautiful. I almost want to challenge again what you were saying a little bit about the ending. Not in like I disagree, but the very ending. There's a scene where they're at that Japanese temple, and the old man's like, "Do you want to go into the temple and see for yourself?" Because he asks him what's in there, and there's this talk about religion. Brendan Fraser's like, "No, I don't think I'm ready for that." And then at the end of the movie, he's ready for that after the funeral, and he goes, and the curtains blow back, and all that's in the temple in the empty room is a mirror showing himself. And it's like the most symbolic, like found yourself type ending. Again, it's good, but I was kind of like, yeah, the movie's over. Yeah. Like I
It's
really
just because
enjoyed it
you're a
all, but it was
grumpy old
cute.
asshole, Brandon. Come on, man. No, I like I
I
said,
can't
it,
challenge that.
it really just depends on, I think, like the appetite that you have for it. Like honestly, it really is just a matter of like, is that something? Because again, I totally, even saying it, like I can imagine if you told me that and I hadn't seen the movie, I'd be like, oh my God, my eyes would roll. But like,
Of
I think
course.
so
Yeah.
much of this is attributed to Brendan Fraser, though. Like, he
Yes.
is so fucking endearingly sweet that it just is impossible not to like feel good for his character in that
Yeah.
moment. Like, and I think that's a testament to the performance and the actor too, that it
If
didn't
this was
bother
like
me
a
that way.
purely Japanese movie with like a Japanese lead and it was a foreign film outright, and no matter how good or dramatic the main actor would be as a Japanese man, I definitely think my rating for this maybe like on Letterboxd like a 3.5, like very enjoyable, but just not like phenomenal. I
Hmm.
think it would be like a 2.5 just because it's not Brendan Fraser bringing all the heart and instant likability that he's earned with his,
Yeah.
like genuine life and career, and the way he's resurged as kind of like everyone's like darling middle-aged man. I was gonna say golden boy, but golden middle-aged man probably is a better way to put it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it as far as like
Yeah.
the crazy stuff. Is there
Well,
anything that really
I
stood out
went
to you
out
that?
from Rental Family and immediately went into the theater next for Hamnet. Which I want to start this off because I don't know how many freaking times you are going to bitch at me about the movies I say we should watch for this podcast. And you don't bitch at me. I want to clarify. You don't bitch at me, but you're like, well, this one
Oh,
definitely looks the worst.
yeah.
And like, I don't want to deal with this. And you have some like one liner like that's derogatory about the movie because of a trailer you saw for it, which admittedly, I don't think I've seen a trailer more for any other movie than I have Hamnet this year.
Yeah.
I've seen that so many freaking times, especially in the last like month or two.
And you have to
Um,
admit, the trailer for Hamnet, it looks absolutely diabolically boring and uninteresting. And
well,
like,
if
what if
you
Shakespeare
watch
had a life? You know, it looks
if
so
you watch
terrible.
the trailer, and I watched it again afterwards just to like refresh myself because I thought this, but that gives you the whole movie, man. Like the trailer. And I don't want to spoil anything at all at this point of the review, but like do not watch that trailer. And again, it's not like even like the beats are given away, but like some of the last shots of the movie are in the last shots of the trailer, and I'm like, ooh. So like it really kind of baffled me that that's how they felt they needed to sell the movie. It's tough, but
I think they could
I
have
don't think
sold
it
it.
really detracts too much though
Yeah,
either.
I think like it's funny you say that because I like as you alluded to was such a hater going in, and I was like, this looks like boring grade 12 English class. Like, I don't want to see like, what if Shakespeare fell in love? What if Shakespeare was a regular guy? And I was like, oh, Oscar bait garbage. Uh, and they spell out like his whole life in the trailer, which they do. But I think like the actual context of the movie is the whole thing, like the delivery and the performances and the intentionality, the pacing, even the trailer, like trailer pacing never matters. It's always, a
Yeah.
minute, so, but the pacing of the movie, this movie for me, it did something that is so rare for a guy like me with big expectations frequently. I went in at like a 1, and not like I had low expectations, but I went in thinking this was going to be just garbage, just absolute, just like circle jerk
Shakespearean love.
Hollywood Shakespeare love, which it is. But by the end of it, I was like, this is cinema. What an amazing movie. The atmosphere of the audience I saw this with was incredible. And just like when you're in grade 10, 11, 12, and the teacher's like, oh, we're in a Shakespeare book now. We're going to teach you about the themes of Hamlet, for example. This movie did exactly how my learning trajectory in high school was. And I know what you're thinking. I should tune out now. But the idea of like, picture, a grade 11 or 12 meathead that's like, Shakespeare, I don't know, that's, and then by the end of it, you're like, that was pretty metal, actually. I thought that was really, really, really sick, the way they explained, the ghost. So, yeah, I think by the end of the movie, I was so bought in, and it's tough because I went in so, like, oh, I can't wait to rip on this and rip on Shea's taste in the movies. Like, this is going to be such a hallmark Victoria, or not even Victorian, like almost medieval time, like love story of like, what if an unemployed writer in the medieval times bedded some crazy witch lady from the woods who has a hawk. And I'm not going to lie, the whole first act, I was still on board with that. I was going to say the first, like the meet cute where they meet each other and he like introduces her and he doesn't ask for her name. He just says, you'll know me when I kiss you and all that stuff. I was like, ooh, I'm like, this is, for lack of a better term, like a meet and fuck RPG iPhone app game where he's just saying them, like he says literally anything. And then she's like, you want to get in bed with me, or like, you fancy me, huh? Or like, and he's just kind of like almost autistically unaware of the social like surroundings. And she even says to him like, you're not so good with words. I thought you were a wordsmith, to that effect. That's not the line. It was way more Shakespearean. And he's just like, I'm a better writer than I am communicator. Da 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 da. It's like, is this movie autism coded? Like, I was so bought out for the first act. The miracle of this movie is by the end of it, I was like one of several people in the theater that was like, God damn, that is like an emotional pivot from what I was expecting and what I was feeling. Like, I hated the movie going in, I hated most of the first act with that mindset. But again, like a grade 11, curriculum, by the time it was ramping up and doing more with the story, I was buying in and being like, wow, actually, this is a great story. What a great twist, great irony, great acting in the movie. Like I sincerely said it as a diss, but now I sincerely mean it as a compliment. I do hope, Gen Alpha that are going through a high school system have a teacher wheel in a TV cart now and put on this movie after we're doing the, Hamlet curriculum reading. Cause I do think it's a very fascinating take on it and just kind of the way people process stuff. Um, and yeah, and the last tangent on this is like Hamlet to me, the story was really impactful. Surprisingly, I know I brought Mary Shelley's Frankenstein the other month, and now I'm bringing up Hamlet. But I took a lot of grade 11 English and grade 12 English classes instead of taking spares. I did really well in those classes, as a storyteller. I thought it was awesome. So Hamlet to me was really impactful because I learned the main takeaway I had from that was that famous line, to be or not to be, that is the question. The sin of the character is not doing the wrong thing or doing the right thing and living in that morally gray area. It was making a choice. That's the thing. And in that same year of learning that lesson in English class, I had a football coach, Mike Smith, who is the most fake name you've ever heard. Had this big divorce dad energy, by the way, had a big thing of saying it's better to make an aggressive mistake than to not make the play at all. Like you're better tackling that guy than not, always commit, make a big jump, do something, then be passive or be idle handedly. So the to do or not to do, to be or not to be, that is the question. Make a big mistake, then not do nothing, not do anything. And then on top of that, I had a driver's ed teacher said the same thing. You see people in front of you slamming on their brake lights, speed up and try to go around them because slamming on your brakes is more likely of having an accident. Speed up instead of slow down, make an aggressive mistake instead of doing nothing. And to be or not to be, that is the question. Grade 11 was such a year of that lesson being reinforced. And I've taken it with me a lot. Like you would agree, I do way too much with my time than nothing. So the story of Hamlet for me, surprisingly, I get it. It's a very surprising thing. Really hit me by the end of my grade 11 year. So I was like, almost like an MCU fan, be like, how are they going to adapt my favorite piece of literature? This is going to be lame. I went in with such a head about this being not a great thing because the trailer was so boring. And yeah, like I said, by the end of it, which we'll get into, I was so in. I was like a Shakespearean experience, the acting and the delivery and the presentation of it, I felt like haunted and I felt like this real human connection. And I did not expect that. I was actively avoiding it, trying to make jokes for the podcast. And I'm absolutely thrilled that I got a lot out of it. So I'm glad I could fit all that in the spoiler-free section, but
yeah, we'll let that be a lesson for you to go in and prejudge movies, Brandon. But no, this is honestly, I was so, well, when you first came out of the movie, you texted me and said, brother's so mad about Hamnet, which we try not to discuss things in advance. So I had no idea. I'm like, he's mad because I made him go. I wasn't sure what the deal was there, but then he sent me the cinema meme. So then I was like, okay, so maybe that he did like it.
To be fair, I photoshopped my face with a very neutral expression. So I still figured that was ambiguous as to if I was ironically being like, what's cinema? Or if I
wasn't convinced either way for sure.
Yeah, good.
I think the funnier outcome for this is that I think you probably liked this more than I did then, based on what you said. But I do have to say too, just as show affection for my friend Brandon, that he likened real examples from like Hamlet to his driving ed class and his football coach, which is like you can take the meathead out of Hamlet, but you can't take Hamlet out of the meathead, like it's still in there. But no, for me, there's two moments in this movie, which we'll get into later, but that are two of the strongest scenes in a movie I've seen all year, arguably. Where the movie faltered for me was in the pieces between them. So like you said, that first act felt like fine, like I just was kind of indifferent to it. Again, it's well shot. The performances from top to bottom are all phenomenal. But yeah, it's just hard not to feel like this is I don't even know if cliche is the right word, but like it just feels baity and enough in that sense where you're
Seeing the
like,
trailer, I definitely felt forced in that first act. Like they show this
yes,
great love story, and it seems like almost like a rom com of Shakespeare era. And that first act, when they're setting up how they met and stuff, it just feels like they're like screenwriters say they got to go. So the next 2 hours or hour or whatever is them developing as people. I was like, I
yeah.
don't fully believe it. But like I
Well, but
said,
we
I bought
like
in.
we have to hit all these bits too, right? And that
Yeah.
again, it's hard to say. It's like when you're one of the old stories or whatever. But again, this is adapted from a fictionalized telling of the story. But you know, like the parents disagree and the brothers support. Like I'm like, okay, I don't like. I
Yeah.
just wasn't feeling anything.
And she's
And then
supposedly
as we
the daughter
get,
of a witch, and like
yeah,
that's very wishy-washy, which again
as
works in
we
the
get
context.
into the middle of it though, there's a like kind of the catalyst point, which I'll be very vague about of the movie. There was just a moment where I just like felt like kind of overcome with the emotion, like it just flooded me all at once. And then again as it gets towards the third act. But yeah, for me, like I really liked it, but I couldn't get over into the love. Like I loved specific moments of this movie, like I adored them. Um but it wasn't a chore, but I just didn't love everything to get there. And I think for me, like there was, like you said, the to be or not to be, there's a moment in this movie where I just kind of was like, oh boy, like
It's almost
that.
like the Family Guy joke where they're like, "Oh, they said the title of the movie, the close," like which they do say Hamnet and Hamlet a lot, but it was
Yeah.
that moment where he's at the pier and he says it to himself, aka the audience, and I was like, "Oh, you said it!" Yeah, I did the Leonardo
Yeah.
DiCaprio point. I was like, "There it is. There's the
And like
line."
I kind of was like I eye rolled at that moment, and I was just like, so I just wasn't fully plugged in on everything that it was
I do
doing,
love that when you
unfortunately.
eye rolled that moment. That was like my big turning point where I was like holding my seat, being like, "Oh, they're getting into it. Like it's finally picking up for me." But I do agree. If I went in more neutral and less like hatery, that moment I too would have been like, ah, "Okay, they got to have it." But for me, I was like, "Oh, it's about it. Like they're going for it. They're really doing it. They're really making this connected to the lore of Shakespeare." Like because I think Shakespeare the guy was like it was like a pen name, wasn't it? Like he's kind of like a Banksy character, right? Like he was a famous writer, but nobody
Bro,
really
I have no
knew him.
idea. I hated Shakespeare stuff in high school. I'm just gonna come out and say it, dude. Notorious Shakespeare hater over here. So I couldn't care less. I don't know anything about anything. I didn't know anything about this story. Like I know it's a fictionalized version, but I didn't know. Oh, he had a kid. Great, dude. I didn't know that. It just all flew right over me. So for me, it was really like kind of a first experience. Not like obviously I know Hamlet, but it was like a first kind of insight into this, like all the characters around his life. Like I knew nothing about like the real person.
Well, I
I'm
don't think
sure
most
I
people
learned
do.
things in university, but or
Yeah.
in high school, but I was "Ew,"
Well,
just
I think
right
that's
over me,
the
dude.
thing
I
about
didn't care.
Shakespeare is like he's not a real person like Shakespeare. I'm pretty sure is anonymous like that. I think that I if I'm wrong, this is gonna be really funny, but I'm pretty sure Shakespeare is like again like Banksy, right? Like we don't know who he is, like he's an artist or a writer that has never been really publicly marked. He's just got some of the greatest like plays and literature. So I think like the beauty of this movie and like the initial source material of the Hamnet book was kind of like let's imagine a man's life so that way we can make a story about one of the greatest, writers of time. So that's the head I went in with. I was like, are they about to just spin me a tale? Like again, like a Hallmark level thing where because it's not like an autobiography, they're just kind of like, or not, a biopic. They're just like, let's shoehorn in this witchy love story and all this foreboding stuff. But I'm pretty sure that's like the deal with Shakespeare was nobody was ever like, oh, it was this guy born this time, this way, married,
No, it
had kids.
definitely, he's a real guy. I don't know where you ever got that from. So
I'm sorry, Miss Rosengall. I should go back to grade
back to the
11.
meathead. You could take the
Yeah,
meathead.
yeah, yeah.
You can show a meathead Hamlet, but he's still a meathead at the end of the day.
He'll still
No,
just remember football and driving classes. Yeah.
no, because I was like, I'm pretty sure the dude's like buried in a specific spot, and they knew who he was. So anyway,
I thought it was an anonymity thing, like he wasn't. Anyways, but yeah. So just cut that, please.
Needless to say, we're not historians.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think for me, ultimately, I definitely think this is worth a watch if you're interested at all in like the Oscar stuff and awards season. Like, frankly, there's like, I wouldn't be stunned if pretty much like every even semi-major performance in this movie was nominated because it would deserve it. From from Shakespeare to, they called it like Agnes or whatever, but it's like Agnes, spelled like Agnes.
Yeah.
It was throwing me off the whole movie. I'm like, what the hell's her name?
I don't think she says William once either. Like it's William Shakespeare.
No, they only say it at one, because I was thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, they haven't said his name this whole movie.
Yeah.
And then when they arrive at one point, they were like, we're here to see William Shakespeare. I was like, oh, there you go. They dropped it. So, but yeah, so I really wanted to love this, and this could have been a moment where my expectations were warped from yours, because I've heard nothing but praise about this movie since basically it hit the festival circuit. And so like it was just inundated with stuff, and I really try my best to separate it. And like I said, I still was like again, there's two of the strongest scenes in a movie I've seen all year in this movie.
100%.
It was just the beats between them that it just felt good. And like as far as my, like, it was really great, frankly. Like again, direction, like the shots, like I was and the performances again are all knockout. But I went, and this is what I mean, I'll get into this in the spoiler section, but the first moment that hit me emotionally, it was so stark for me, because it was like I just was feeling nothing for the whole first act of the movie into this moment. Then it just overwhelmed me, and then there's like another lull before it peaks back over again. So
I think you and I are identical there. Like I went in hating it but feeling nothing. You went in like excited and then felt nothing,
feeling nothing.
You do hit like, it's, I would say, almost middle of the movie. You start going, oh, this is like the real story, the real Shakespearean tragedy, because it does feel very forced, like the way the idyllic life starts. And again, not to derail, but if you're an unemployed writer with an abusive father figure and romance nobody approves of, and you have a beautiful family with 3 kids and you're living in like a 5-bedroom home in the medieval times, I'm still mad, because I'm like, I can't afford that with a good job nowadays. So as Shea knows, my economic disparity is always like pretty high. You know, it's like you make $100K a year in a major metropolis city. Metropolis is Superman, and metropolitan city. You're not doing well, but how is this guy, like in the modern age? That would be like, yeah, I make $50K a year as a freelance blogger for a website. This girl I met online who, has an OnlyFans because she's witchy. We decided to have a love story, but they would have like a 1/2-bedroom studio condo, and rent would be due, and that would be it. Like there would never be anything of merit. Like, so I'm jealous of Shakespeare in this movie, because
Shakespeare had it so much easier than Brandon Fraser does in 2025.
Shakespeare's just medieval boomer, like bootstraps. Oh, you love being a dude. I love the scene where his dad's like, don't be like your brother. He's a scholar. What a waste. You need a blue collar trade.
Dude.
And I'm sitting there being like, that's gonna be me when I have kids. I'll be like, yeah, don't go to college or university like I did. You should be a blue collar guy, because that's the only way you'll get ahead, son. But anyways, yeah, I think I've derailed way too much.
Let's jump
get into
in.
spoilers.
I think. So just to confirm before we do, so you're in a love on this one then?
I would say I'm in a love, and I did want to challenge when you said I recommend it. I actually do not recommend it to anybody that will see this outside of a movie theater. I think if I wasn't in a movie theater, I would have, honest to God, been on my phone the whole time. Like, it is a movie that if you don't give it the breathing room to excel, it is so hard to buy in. And much like Shakespearean, I wish there was subtitles for this movie in the theater. I don't think people will find it nearly as enjoyable on streaming. So I'm just saying I recommend it if you're somebody who's like a cinephile and has patience for it. But I mean, me recommending this to my mom who doesn't have access to a major city where she can go see the one theater in the whole GTA playing this and would watch it on streaming. I feel like she'd be incredibly lost and confused. Again, an older woman, sure, but I would say I recommend this in theaters for the theater experience and to be washed over by the atmosphere of the movie. But if you heard this podcast and you go boot this up in a month on streaming, Brandon said that's a terrible idea. Shea said go for it. I said do not, because this movie will suck on streaming explicitly. So, uh,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I think it really comes down to, again, it's how you engage with the movie. Like, for all the reasons you said there, I don't like watching movies on streaming because you're too tempted to pause it, walk away, go to the bathroom, do all these things. I mean, you go to the bathroom during the movies anyway, but real adults that can control their bladder don't, and drink 17 liters of Diet Coke every day. But regardless, no, I agree. I think it's a tougher watch because, again, if especially at the beginning, like we see maligned on that, if you're not getting into it, it's definitely a struggle, and I feel like I definitely would be unsure of the impact on you if you just watch this one day at home, with all that distraction. But if you have to watch it at home, set yourself up. Like I do what I can to be like, I've blocked out this time. Nothing's going to be happening. I don't have to make dinner. I don't have to whatever. I'm locked in and engaged. Give the movie a chance. I definitely think you won't regret it if you really can buy in and give it what it needs and deserves to, frankly. But yeah, let's dive into the spoiler side. I want to talk about, again, I say the spoiler side, the trailers give away all of the major beats of this movie. And it's weird to say, like, the catalyzing incident, the setup, is the death of Hamnet, his son. And that happens like halfway through the movie. And once again, like, I knew this was coming because I'd seen the trailer 3,000 times. And so again, it probably didn't help that first act where I'm like, okay. And then they have like this weird mystery bit almost of where they're like, oh, you'll die with two kids will be at your bedside. But then she has twins after they've already had a child. So then there's three kids. She thinks it's going to be the daughter, Judith, I think, that dies.
Yep.
And then it's obviously, but I'm like, I know it's going to be Hamnet, and like
Yeah.
so it just,
The
it's one of
titular
those weird
character.
bits where, yeah, it just kind of feels like,
if
okay, like it
if it
takes a minute to
wasn't
get to where I already am to start
if
the
it
movie
wasn't
off.
literal Shakespeare, it would be incredibly lazy foreshadowing between the marketing and the whole picture. 100%. I would say the thing that actually made me buy in more, and this is why you understand why I like it, and this is the through line here on the pod. The main character of this movie, I wouldn't even say Shakespeare or Hamnet. I'd say it's his wife Agnes.
No,
Like
for sure.
the perspective and the choice to have a Shakespeare movie where the trailers sell it as like, what if Shakespeare had a life? And it actually focuses more on his family unit and his distance. Shakespeare, effectively, now that we're in spoiler territory, is a bit of a deadbeat dad. He's a great dad when he's there, but he's gone working on his career, which you understand because his career is larger than life. Like, he's an iconic figure. And I think I really like that. That's how I kind of found my way in, was finding a guy who's torn between what he loves and what he feels the urge to
Parental
do.
problems is what it's required to get Brandon on board.
That and being a workaholic. The scene when he's up late
Double
writing.
whammy. Yeah.
Yeah, when he's up late writing and she's a great wife to him for most of the movie. And she's like, "What's wrong, dear?" And he's like, he basically says it's not enough. Like, my family, my life, like, it's not, I need more of this life. And he's trying to write his opus and he's struggling and he's drunk. He's like, that is me editing clips of the podcast at midnight on a Tuesday. And my girlfriend's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, my business and my 60-hour week day job aren't enough. I have to get some likes on the pod. So I'm finding memes and gifs at 2 a.m, and that's my Shakespearean comparison. But yeah, like I think I bought into Shakespeare because he was a deadbeat dad workaholic, and he never grieves. He puts it into his work, and I like that kind of troubled artist thing. It's corny, but I think that worked for me a lot. And then it worked really well in contrast because we don't see him for probably 40% or more of the movie, almost half of it, because it really follows his wife's story, which is the far better story when you're setting it up to be like, to effectively show us the best scenes from Hamlet, the play. And that whole like end of the third act, the finale, is our main character who we've grown attached to watching the play for the first time, traumatized that her husband has made this big theatrical play about it, but then seeing the way the people react and understanding kind of his thing. Like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, but it was pretty electric, honestly, because I was so like corned out being like, this is so corny, this is so lame. But by the end of it, it was hitting so hard because I found my way in on multiple characters. And then the culmination of his work and her reaction and the audience and the Shakespearean level of performance and all that, like it came together really well. But yeah, I'd say Shakespeare being an absent father from a large chunk of the movie after showing him being like a good guy for the most part. And then having the tragedy, it was just enough of everything for it to click in by the finale. If I was critiquing the marketing, I would have thought they would have sold this more like an A24 cerebral thriller where they just show the most heady stuff from the trailer and then a few of the screaming or crying or nighttime scenes, and then like sell it as like, the horrors of Hamnet kind of thing, as opposed to, the Hallmark love story it sold it as, when it was actually it was like a love letter to Shakespeare, as far as like all the themes, like all these little like weirdly otherworldly, questionable premonitions and the thought of ghosts and like that, like that's very Shakespearean. And yeah, I don't know, it felt like it gets me there, and it definitely combines a lot of what Shakespeare did. So the fact that it worked out is incredible, and I do think it's funny because part of me was like, oh no, is this going to spin off a Shakespeare verse, like the Dark Universe or the MCU, or now there's going to be a heavy dramatic version of Taming of the Shrew that's not that Glenn Powell, Sydney Sweeney movie, so, but anyways, yeah, sorry, I kind of just repeated myself about why I
No, no,
liked
no.
it, but ultimately, yeah, it's the deadbeat dad aspect and following his wife. It's kind of like when they did Elvis by following Priscilla. If they sold me that version of the movie, I also don't think I would care. I'm like, why do I care about Shakespeare's wife? The guy was a legend. But, almost the trailer being so bad layered my expectations so low that when the halfway mark hits, I was like, oh, I buy in on the wife. Like, she was a great wife, all these things. Shakespeare's great. Like, they go in different directions. And when they come back at the end, I was like, damn, that's haunting. That's profound. That's dramatic. Like, and that's what you want from a Shakespeare property adaptation. And, yeah, I'm trying to think of like gripes, I guess, like as far as like other than like you and I both agreeing it's a slow roll. You don't really find your way in till about halfway when it actually picks up a real story
Well,
and
but
isn't.
let me highlight mine then, because I think maybe
Yeah,
that'll help influence it a bit. So for me, I really felt nothing up until the point, and I remember the exact moment. It was specifically when Hamnet dies and there's a silence. And
yeah.
just in that moment, and just kind of like the performances again, and even the child, like just like laying there, I just like, dude, like just tears just kind of like, I didn't bawl, but like the emotion just swelled over and I just started crying. And then that's when she lets out that guttural
Oh
scream,
my God, yeah,
and like that just built on it, and like that was so much. And that was really the point where I was like, okay, like I said, dude, I just went from like, this is a craft, like I can't bitch about really any of it, it's just not imposing on me at all. And then all of a sudden it just like it came on me all at once, and I just broke down. And that was really the moment. And then I think there was this kind of contrast when, like, her reaction to his, right?
yeah.
When he gets there and he's under the assumption, again, I hope I'm saying the
That
right name, that Judith is the one that's dying, and he gets there and she's upright and she's fine. So he embraces her, but that's when he realizes that Hamnet's dead. And he just like is like, I don't want to say emotionless because he's clearly impacted, but it's so much more reserved. And like you said, he pours that into his work. And so the gap between that moment and then the play, the first I guess, what do you call it back then, the first doing of the play, I don't know,
yeah, the
the
debut,
first
I guess. Yeah, I know what you
performance,
mean. Yeah,
yeah, the first performance that they see, which ultimately is what ends on the movie. um again, I just kind of fell back into that. I wasn't quite at nothing again because now I've already had sort of this emotional buy-in at this point. But I just felt like I just kind of spring up and then spring down and then I back to flat. And then when that performance, the whole thing goes, I spring back up and I spring back down. But then the movie ends. And so for me, it was just like if I could isolate these moments, everything else, it wasn't that it was filler. Like I wouldn't, it's just that it's just nothing about it was exceptional before that. It just felt like, again, like we're hitting cliched bits. Um, Moments are going over again, all of it was
Paint
good.
by
I
numbers,
just,
just making
but
it
yeah,
to a certain point.
I
Yeah.
just wasn't invested. And then you get me invested in that moment. And I admittedly was like, after that point, I was more locked in for the rest, but I still felt kind of this like lull again between those moments, and they keep having marital problems, and it's like you weren't here, you know, and I'm like I
And
just find it kind of
inevitably,
frustrating,
in the
and
deadbeat dad story, you always get the marriage falling apart. And because it felt so good and earnest building up towards, the death of Hamnet, I was like, oh man, I hope the middle chunk of the second act isn't just them hating each other, which it is, and I too fell back in the lull. But at that point, I'm like, oh, you've earned, what's the Django and Shea thing? He's like, you had my attention, but now you have my curiosity. I was at least hovering at like a like at that point. So I totally get it. And I wanted to touch on your segment there when you said his reaction to Hamnet's death. He sees assumedly he sees the boy or the body, the corpse wrapped up in the blanket, and what he says is, "Where is my son?" Like, where is he? And he says that later in the movie. He's like, he wakes up thinking about where he is in the world if he's dead, because you don't. And again, that's like that
Mhm,
Shakespearean thing of like just over describing something so poetically of like, somebody can't just leave. Like, it's the most like fundamental like grief feeling, and it's said in such an earnest thing. And then when you see the climax and the ghost of Hamlet, or the ghost in the play, is
mhm,
a man in robes, like the blankets of his dead son. And I think visually it translates really well. So it's almost like, as you're saying, if you're saying like the middle point and the climax are just like peak cinema, the whole first act is a little bit like, okay, get to the point. And then that
mhm,
second act low, the bathroom break, as I call it, which I didn't because I was pretty bought in. It does fall in like cliche territory of like, to be fair, I will say I did love the follow-up scene the morning after the son's death. He's not even there for the funeral. He goes straight back to work. And again, like A1, workaholic dad move. But when he tells her he's leaving and she goes to slap him and he dodges the slap and
mhm,
embraces her with that hug. It was such an impactful moment. Both the slap where he dodges it, my whole theater went, they did an audible like jump. And then when he holds her and hugs her, I heard at least one person go like, oh my God. Like, just like they were tearing up, being like, because they understood, they're like, he's got to go be Shakespeare. She can't understand, but she must, like, again, there's good bits in there, but yeah, like the scene when he's like, oh, we got the new house. It's so big. And she's unimpressed. And the daughter's like, I'll get lost in here. It's so big, daddy. Terrible clip right there. But, it's, earlier when he's like, it came all over me. And I'm like, it's so big, daddy. But the whole point is, to summarize, it was kind of treading cliched waters. A part that gave me wicked anxiety, which I would relate to the theater going experience, is when she's in like the front row. And isn't that funny now how at a concert or a stage play, the front row is like the floor seats are the most expensive and people in the back are now really expensive. And here it's the opposite. Like, oh yeah, funny how times have changed. But, yeah, she's in the front row and she keeps acting like this. And it is literally her life story. But when she's
mhm.
asking questions like, who's he? Why is he saying my son's name? And I was like, shut the fuck up. Shh. They're trying to
Yeah.
shush her. I was like, oh God. And I thought we'd make a bit out of it, but it was super earned and earnest. And, yeah, climax and middle part, peak cinema, peak everything. But yeah, funny enough, it's hard to say that because typically when you get that peak like enjoyment level, it's because it was so well set up. And I think it was well set up, but it was incredibly, boring and cliche to a degree. So I totally agree with you. I would say on our heart meter, I definitely would love it. Like I love it. It's a great movie. But I think on like a letterbox scale, objectively to like a more number based system, I think it's like a hard 4. Like a 4.5 means it was like so close to perfect, and a 5 being like an absolute perfect film with no criticism. This is definitely like a 4. Like it falls into love because of how much it made me feel, but it wasn't necessarily a good movie the entire time around. So I think weirdly enough, we do uh, mirror each other pretty well opinion wise on this. I think I just added a lot of personal layers because I went in with that like you can't retell me Hamlet. I know Hamlet. Like that's my high school
Well, I
experience.
think a lot of it has to do with where we started, right? Like you said, like
Hmm.
I was really trying hard to suppress expectations, and you had none, no good ones
I
anyway.
bought into hate expectations. I was like, I'm going to hate watch this
Yeah.
movie. I'm giving it like a -1, and I left giving it a 4. You went in
Yeah,
trying to be
for the
like,
record, I
it's at
sent you
least
a
a
list
2.
of movies, and you were like, "This one is the one I'm
The,
least interested in."
yeah, the only one I don't
So,
want to see. Like, like, and I
yeah, I'm
never
like,
say that
"Sorry, well, that's
outside.
the one we have to see." So that was a fun little bit for me. But there's two things. So about the ending, like I wrote my letterbox review, which I gave it a 3.5 because I mirror mine now, so they're the same thing. But that's a really like to me. I wanted to love this, and I love those parts, but I just, as a whole, I can't say I loved the whole movie. Um, but the ending, if you're a big ending guy like me, where you're like the whole movie can be shit, but if you nail an ending, like it can be really impactful. This was a case where like the end, they end on that play. Like that is, and this is what blew me away watching the trailer again after, was like that closing shot of him like reaching up as the crowd is all reaching for him,
Yeah.
and then that's in the fucking trailer. I was like, guys, like, it didn't bother me at the time watching the movie, but looking at the trailer afterwards, I'm like, holy fuck, you just cover like all of the major beats in this and show all of them too. But two things I wanted to point out to you that I'm not sure if you are aware of. One was driving me fucking nuts was the score that was playing during the last act, during the play.
Yeah. It's funny. I
Did
wanted
you
to Google
Google
this.
this?
I didn't Google it, but I was going to say
Okay.
that is a very overused, good piece of music, but overused. And I was kind of blown away that I noted it being like, what is that? I've heard that in several
Overused
movies.
because we see it on like shitty, but so it was fucking me up because I'm like, well, that's not an original score, but it's at a moment where I would have expected an original score to
It
be
fits
playing.
exceedingly well, but the piece of music itself, I swear I've heard
Yeah.
in a dozen other movies, and it's a good piece of music, but that would be like playing Requiem for a Dream song at the end of this movie, being like, wow, it fits,
So
but
the
it's
movie that I remembered it from, and it was bothering me all night because I'm like, because I was gaslighting myself. I'm like, maybe I've just seen the trailer so many times that the score is recognizable to me, but I'm like, that can't be it. That can't be it. It's the same song. It's not like whatever, but it's the same music they used in Arrival. And
that would
that's
mess me
what
up.
really kicked off like the whole bit. So
Dude, oh my
it's a
God.
great piece of
It's a
music,
great
and it's a
piece.
great piece of music. But it was like, honestly, it was just, I'm like in my head, I'm like, this, what the fuck? Because my first immediate thought was Interstellar. I'm like, that's not right. And then I'm like,
No,
oh, it's
yeah.
Arrival. It's Arrival. And
What
so yeah, it's not. I mean, maybe they did a different version or whatever for this movie, but it is an old song that was from like 2004.
yeah.
And yeah, it was used in Arrival. It's called
I'm
On the Nature of Daylight. But it was blowing my mind at the time because I'm like, what the fuck? And like I thought the trailer had played so many
I'm
times that I
phenomenally
remember.
grateful that you got to break that news to me. Like this is not like a clickbait like reaction thing, but I couldn't put my finger on it, and that was my big takeaway leaving. I was like, that piece again works perfectly. It's great,
Yeah.
everything about the movie, but that piece distracted me. And regardless, I guess that's a sin on the movie. And I was trying to think, what is it? Now that you say it, and I'm like mind blown that they took something from such a other big, well loved movie. Is like I think I was watching like Taken 3 or something. Like it was a bad movie, and there's a scene where the daughter gets kidnapped and she's listening to the Chromatics, which have a song. It's like the ticking
Yeah.
clock from Drive, and I was like, "You're not Drive, Taken 3." And now I'm like, you're not Arrival, the Shakespeare movie. Like, yeah, now I'm mad. Like, I'm
Yeah.
bumping my review down.
Well,
That
so that
sucks.
it blew my mind because I couldn't believe that they didn't craft their own score for that moment.
Yeah.
And it was, I get why, like, it's an easy, but like, again, it's funny that you were distracted also. Like, I just remember, like, I kept feeling the emotion of the moment, and then I kept going, like, why the fuck do I know this music? Like, it
Yeah.
was just like in my head, and it's from Arrival, but I feel like it's been used so many times in these weird like Instagram videos and YouTube, like it just constantly becomes like background music to
Yeah.
so many different things. Um,
Well,
but that threw me
thematically,
off.
it's very similar to Arrival, like where the ending
Mhm.
plays out the way it does, and the message that you're taking away is that this is bigger than life. Like this is this
Yeah,
revelation of like human connectivity and experience. And legitimately, Arrival is about aliens that kind of travel through time in a way and have an infinite like language. And I'm doing such a disservice trying to summarize Arrival, but the ending with that song is so thematically similar of like
yeah,
this is a revelation bigger than life. And so is like the Shakespeare thing of like, you can have this interpersonal connection to a story. And again, I think the thing I would like to coin as far as like, what is Oscar bait? And it's always a love letter to cinema or entertainment. Like I talk about Babylon a lot being this really interesting thing where I saw it and felt like, that's an obvious Hollywood love letter to, how grand it was, how no one person is bigger than
mhm,
entertainment. But this movie hits a lot of those, entertainment is life beats where it's like having, grief and stuff processed through a tragedy and having everyone connect to it. Like that's what every director wants is to have their thing screened and somebody to be like, this resonated with me. And I feel like that's what makes this much more Oscar baity. It's not these performances that are phenomenal, but I do think it's like that theme. And now that you're saying the music is tying it to Arrival, where there's a very similar revelation of like, this is what it's been about all along. This story, this grand
yeah,
experience. It's brutal. Like again, the Taken 3 thing, it's like go ahead, rip off the song from Drive. You're not Drive, where this is like you're trying to be the ending of Arrival right now. You're trying to actually tell us that this is bigger. This revelation's so big, it transcends human experience. It does, but yeah, dude, holy shit. If you told me that like was in again, like say Requiem for a Dream, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, that was about like human nature and addiction or something, sure. But the fact that it's like the end scene, which I remember pretty vividly, it's almost like flashback storytelling to be like, that's what it all means. And now it's like
yeah.
having that context for that ending, which I felt was so cinematically beautiful and like they leave it on the table. You see how they react, but they never have a conversation at the end, like Rental Family, where it's like,
Hmm.
so I learned the lesson, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's very much like lives are ruined and people change and like beautiful, but holy cow. Now that I know that, I'm actually so mad at that's crazy.
Yeah,
Wow.
I frankly, when I pieced that together, I was baffled. I was like, I cannot believe that wasn't original music that they made for that. Because I feel like, yeah, it did distract me in the moment. And again, if you're someone that hasn't seen these other movies, whatever, you're not as inundated with the music. I did feel like it was distracting me from the moment, which again, still amazing, still super impactful, but was something I couldn't shake and I figured out later. But the other fact that I thought, which I did not clock, did not know, and found out after, which blew me away and I thought was great, the kid that plays Hamlet in the play is Noah Jupe, who has been in the Quiet Place movies. Um, he was in Honey Boy, which I also really liked from quite a few years back. But the kid that played Hamnet, Shakespeare's son, is Jupe's little brother.
Oh, that's good. That's some
And
good
that
casting.
I thought was like, yeah, like, cause his name is Jacoby Jupe. That kid was fucking lights out phenomenal. Like he was
Yeah.
really good as
There's no bad
Hamnet
kid
and
actors in
all
this
of
movie.
those. No. And like again, when I say like Noah Jupe coming in when he did, like again, it would almost be like a guest spot, like because he's really only in like kind of two moments, and but it's the huge moment at the end and the rehearsal scene. Um, but he is so good in that moment. But just the likening that to his brother too, like I'm like, oh, like there was a layer, like once that revelation happened, where I thought maybe a little less of the movie because of the music choice. I thought more of it with this casting choice, because I thought it was a really like it's an inspired decision to have, you know, two actual brothers play the real character and the fictional one. um
Well,
and again,
especially
like the likenesses for like for what it means for the emotional payoff and the impact and everything. I thought that was brilliant, and I had no idea of that when I was
well,
watching the
especially because
movie.
like, you know, I said like in a worse non-Shakespeare thing, it would be lazy foreshadowing, but with that little detail that makes the foreshadowing of, you know, the mom trying to tell the future saying, I see you on stage with your father sword fighting. And, you know, and now it's like, ooh, when something like a premonition or whatever is true, but it's in a different light. And it's
But
like,
it's not what you thought.
that is the Shakespearean element. And yeah, when I was watching that, I had that exact thought. I was like, putting myself in the shoes of the mother, I was like, oh God, what a hard watch. You know, like I can't imagine, because he does look so similar, like as if he was the grown up version of her dead son. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow. So I think, again, thank you for giving me the backstory and properly researching this for film journalism, because that adds a huge layer of appreciation for something that I thought was like really good. But yeah, now it's
Yeah.
like, like you said, I was like, I'm bumping this down from a 4 to 3.5. And I'm like, back to a
Now you're
4,
back. You're
dude.
back where you were.
Back to a 4.
No,
Yeah.
I think that was well, like that was just one of the things that I thought was fascinating. And again, both of them were amazing. And I really like, I would say Paul Mescal, um like both of the brothers, like I couldn't believe the performance from that little kid, especially when he was talking to his sister, where he like take tricks death and like take me instead, and then his death scene was like horrific. Like absolutely nailed that. But I think the obvious one is Jessie Buckley. She's I I would bet all of the money I have that she's at least, at very least, getting nominated. I think an obvious front runner for best actress this year.
Do you think it's best
Um,
actress or best supporting actor? Because
well,
this is where
she's
I
the
was
main
getting at.
character for me
She's
in
the
this
main
movie,
character
for
for
sure, without
me,
question. Yeah,
but
well, without question, I think if you even do that on a screen time basis, like I would
yeah.
personally, I would, again, there's no like metric for this, like, which is a weird thing to have to come up with too. But she for sure is the main character, and then I would say Paul Mescal as the supporting. Like, I granted he's in there quite a bit, but he is not the main character of this movie. And I think you know, like I think that's so, like it's the thing I like most about this movie, and I think this is my last bit, is that how effective the end was at conveying, like we talked about when she lets out that visceral scream and he is a lot like less emotive in that moment. But it's not because he hurts any less or anything like that. And to see that ending kind of come through, and like the whole theme of that being like what was getting me was I was looking at that end moment, and yeah, I was fixed on Jessie Buckley for a lot of it, but I couldn't help but stare at the people behind her that were all watching the thing too, and were crying and were emotional. And it was like that ability, and I know this is like you know, it's very, it's not as on the nose as Babylon was specific to movies, but like the storytelling aspect and like the power of like being able to do that is such a skill that it can only, like other people can share your grief and your pain and experience it and feel it. And I think that was just such like an overwhelmingly emotional bit. Like again, I was full on, like
Yeah.
both eyes like leaking on either side, and I was like just like kind of overwhelmed by the emotion of that ending. And then for it to close on that, I thought was brilliant. And my only wish was I just wish I was more in on the rest of it. That it didn't feel like these giant high points were gapped between these kind of lulls. Like, even like one of the other things I just wanted to quickly mention too was like, in between the death scene and then the final scene at the end, where her mom, her adopted mom or whatever, comes back and they have like, you were never a real mom anyway. I'm
Yeah, yeah. I
like
told you
it
not to marry
just
that man. Yeah.
and maybe this is true of the source material or whatever, but I just couldn't help but see all these cliched bits. And I just, in a movie where the emotion and the execution and the talent was so evident, to get it bogged down in those cliches was really kind of the part that disappointed me the most.
I would totally agree. And I think the perfect summary of like this episode, Shakespeare, the movie itself, Hamnet, the Hamnet. No, I'm kidding. But the Hamnet. It sounds like the Simpsons, the like Phil Hartman thing, where
Honestly,
they're like, "You may
if
have seen me in
anyone
the Hamnet."
if anyone has listened this far in and likes this idea, let us know in the comments, but we should just make t-shirts where we just add the to movie titles that
Yeah,
didn't have it. We'll just put like, Jaws, it'll be the Jaws, and we'll just like sell merch like
the
that.
best one would be the Facebook. Like for the Facebook movie.
Yeah,
But
yeah, exactly.
sorry, the Social Network, which is actually called it. Anyways, but to bring it back to the heartfelt theme you're talking about, where in an obvious way it conveys that expression of people appreciating good storytelling and emoting and having the ability to connect to something through storytelling being larger than life, larger than anyone's individual grief. Um, when the movie ended, I was somewhat expecting people to applaud, but there was dead silence. In fact, you could hear people clearing their throat, wiping their eyes. And then as the lights came up and they were playing the credits, people started applauding. And this was a theater that had maybe 40 seats. I went to the Arctic, Callowit in Canada, and the only movie theater they had was about 30 to 40 seats. I saw Dune 2 or 3 times in theaters, not as many as Shea, but I saw it in the Callowit for a second or third time, and I remember thinking how small and intimate the theater was. This experience for Hamnet was equally intimate here in Toronto, to the point where it's such a small theater that when that dead silent death scene happens, I could hear the booming Begonia score coming through the doors. Um, but again, to summarize, my theater had an applause that was delayed, and it was like respectfully delayed. It was like an applause for the
Mm.
lights, applause for people to like let it sink in and not just like start clapping over it to be performative. And I thought like very similar. I think it's the same theater as If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, where people also applauded and stayed and talked. Like the big message and the big Oscar clickbait thing of like uh, appreciating entertainment because it's bigger than life or bigger than one story is the ability to express that story to many. And thematically very beautiful. And I was going to ask you, did you guys have an applause in your theater, or was it a very neutral Montreal crowd on a Friday night?
We had a lot. There wasn't a big applause. There's a couple like off
Yeah,
claps
yeah,
sprinkled throughout, but there was a lot of like, again, in those moments of silence, there was a lot of like, sniffling. Like
yeah.
I
You
could
could
tell
tell.
the emotions were really hitting a lot of people in there. Again, also like a pretty old crowd we had for this. This was playing at your favorite theater, the Forum,
The
here in Montreal. My fucking ass was so sore after Rental Family and Hamnet back to back on those shitty old seats. But yeah, a lot of old people were out for this movie too. So
well,
oddly enough, too, we had an old man do the old Facebook phone check right in the middle of the movie as well. So, bad theater etiquette, not tied to just young people.
what I would say on that note is this didn't happen in Hamnet because I had such a great crowd of old people and 30-year-old podcasters who sat alone to watch the theater experience movie play out. This is the other movie we had seen. It was with my girlfriend, and the person in the very front row of a sold out theater on opening night kept checking their Discord messages. Why do I know it's Discord? Because it was so bright, I could see it 16 rows up. And like a well adjusted person, I didn't scream in the middle of the theater to put your phone away. But what I did have happen was my girlfriend, who wears the pants in my relationship, at the end of the movie, I call her a seat seeking missile instead of a heat seeking missile. She went down to them immediately and came up and knocked them on the shoulder and said, "Hey guys, being on your phone the entire movie is really disrespectful and you shouldn't do that." And they were like, really. But the thing that killed me that I didn't even realize is Shea's got one of these, but I have three of them. Is my girlfriend was wearing a navy blue sweater and a Cineplex employee hat. And so when she came down the steps and tapped on the shoulder, said, "Hey guys, don't be on your phone." I'm thinking there's at least an 80 to 90% chance those teens that were checking their Discord moderator updates saw like a Cineplex employee and were like, "Oh my God," and it really stuck with them. So instead of talking about bad theater etiquette, which is very commonplace on this channel, I would say we should talk about solutions. And one of them is to have the stolen valor of a Cineplex employee and tell people what the rules are. Because, I understand minimum wage doesn't mean maximum effort. And I don't expect every 16-year-old working at Cineplex to go in and tell a grown man to get off his phone. But if you can, hit a Value Village in your area, try to find a bunch of Cineplex hats, give them to all your friends, and start enforcing the rules of Cineplexes.
Let's test this out. I want to be the Cineplex like goon squad, dude. Like we're gonna go in and we're just gonna be like, "Excuse me," and they'll just think we're like seat planters, right? I like
Maybe
that
that's
idea
our
because
maybe that's
the
our
hats
merch.
will grant us authority.
We get the Cineplex, and that's an unofficial hat you can go buy to then enforce it at the theaters. Because again, I was really fortunate with a lot of my screenings this week. But yeah, that one screening, it was absolutely hilarious. And then when we left, I looked at my girlfriend as she's walking in her navy blue suit and her navy blue sweatpants and her navy blue Cineplex hat. I was like, "You look like an employee. Like all you need is an earpiece and like a little name tag." And people would have been like, "Oh shit, somebody called the theater and told us to get out." So yeah, impersonate a local Cineplex employee and enforce the golden
Enforce
rule
your
that silence
rules.
is golden.
Yeah, well, speaking of silence is golden, I went to the movie Sick, but I was feeling better yesterday. I think by going out yesterday, I've made myself feel worse today, but there is such thing as being too sick to go to the theater, because in my Hamnet screening, there was this lady that multiple times I saw in my peripheral vision come down the right side, go out, and there's like, at the Forum, there's like the walkway underneath the theater when you come in for the first two sets of doors and you come in around. She went and I could hear her basically pacing in the back because she would cough behind my left ear and then behind my right ear. And she's just having cough attacks in that back area where we like all could obviously hear her. So it's like, if you're that down and out, like just go another night. Okay. We live in Montreal. Movies are here for a long enough time. You can get another chance to go see it. But if you're too sick, please don't go to the movie theater.
I just want to add on to that because I had very similar, what you call spatial audio, left and right equally balanced. At my rental family screening, it was all single 30-year-old dudes and two sick puppies. And this lady, similar to you, back left, literal back left top of the theater, and a guy back right. And I was dead center of the screening. The lady every 30 to 45 seconds would go, and clear her throat like in that sequence. And it sounded like I've been playing a lot of Battlefield 6, and it sounded like an anti-air turret gun firing. And then the guy occasionally would sneeze, and we would sneeze and be like, but it sounded like an RPG firing. And I was just like, oh my God, it was such a chill movie, but I felt like I was in a war zone of coughing and sneezing. So for the love of God, a cold and flu season, please do not go to the theater if you are too sick to be a little bit more quiet. And I'm not trying to be picky, but God damn, that was a rough movie.